So today we're going to be addressing Chapter 9, Children Birth through Age 5. And the objectives of this chapter are to understand the systems that serve children from birth to age 5, to identify potential needs of the families, and to have an understanding of the transition points that the child and family go through. So when we're talking about children ages 0 to 3, obviously that families have expectations that their child will develop in a typical fashion and may even hope, of course, that happens. And it's not uncommon at this time for families to compare their child's developmental milestones to other children's. And we do know that this is a period of growth that is rapid. So ages 0 to 5, children are really all in all areas developing very rapidly. This will occur again in adolescence, but this is one of the times in life where development is quick. So if families notice that their child is behind on one or more of the life's tasks in any area of development, they certainly may need additional support. Your textbook in Table 9.1 is quite lengthy. I'm not going to go over it here, but essentially what this gives you is in the areas of physical development, social and emotional development, intellectual development, and language development, typical development, and any warning signs. And so for teachers, it's really important to have a sense of typical development and what that means. And so here we go through the months. Again, it's rapid, so child's changing rapidly. And this takes us up through the first couple years of life. In this age, children will be receiving early intervention, and it's going to depend on the state where you live as to who oversees early intervention services. So we need to know that. But we know that there are programs provided to infants and toddlers, and that these programs are critical in terms of supporting children and families. We do know that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act does cover ages birth through, in most states, age 21. And so there are certain sections of the law that address very young children versus our older children. So Part C, it's referred to as Part C of the federal law of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, serves ages birth to 3, and these services are called early intervention. In the state of Pennsylvania, where most of us reside at this time, the Department of Public Welfare, not the Department of Public Education, oversees early intervention services for this age range. So Part C of IDEA certainly talks about child find, locating all children that are in need of early intervention, potentially, those at risk and those that do need, and provides for local education agencies to do this work. Certainly, we know that we're evaluating young children, and we're making sure that we cover these areas: cognition, physical development, their communication, their social emotional development, and their adaptive skills. What will result if the child is in need of services is referred to as the Individual Family Service Plan. It is different from the IEP that many of us are familiar with, but it is a family-based treatment plan. So we're not just addressing the child, which of course that's the focus, but we're addressing the family as a whole. And the MDT, or multidisciplinary team, will develop this IFSP. Family members will be present and advocate if they choose, or a person outside of the family. The service coordinator is the person from an agency or local agency that will oversee the family service planning, and obviously appropriate people to conduct evaluations as needed. So again, family members, other participants, a service coordinator, assessment personnel, and the providers, the teachers of the early intervention services. An IFSP has two general purposes: to set outcomes and goals, as we know, and to include the family. It must include content used for early intervention, including all of the programming, and how we're going to be collaborating with family members. Early intervention programs, again, will focus on these 5 areas of growth, which we would have had assessed: physical, cognition, communication, social, emotional, and adaptive skills. Part C of IDEA specifies that services are take place in the natural environment, which is usually the family's home. And in the home environment, the family is more open socially to bond with the service provider and to build a personal relationship. So this is important. And the service provider is modeling how to teach and work with the child, so that there's this transfer of teaching from the professional to the family. In the content of the ISP, the services provided will be part of that, and they're going to vary, obviously, depending on the needs of the child. So most common, though, are speech and language work, specially designed instruction, OT and PT, and certainly the monitoring of the developmental stages of the child. We're looking for outcomes, and so when we look at studies, particularly longitudinal studies, we know that the data indicates that families viewed early intervention services as easy to access, right? And there's also positive outcomes when the child receives early intervention. And so this is just from your textbook. Take a look at that in terms of the graphing. All right. We then move, and it's a little bit different because families become used to this family service plan. But there's a transition at this time for children ages 3 to 5, right? Where child's moving into an IEP. Children become more independent, of course, at this time. They've developed rapidly, right? And then a lot of them are entering a school setting, so a preschool. So that's where the services will take place. And so there's a lot of development that will be addressed in the preschool setting. So once the child begins interacting with others outside the family, unfortunately at this time, again, this comparison, there may be that this atypical development is more noticeable. So local education agencies are still required to have child find, all the professionals that are needed are still involved through the local education agency. So at this time, again, there may be further evaluation. So the child may have received early intervention, may be termed as a developmental delay, but a full diagnosis of disability may not have occurred. So there might be further evaluation, and then a more fully specified disability could occur at this time. For children already receiving services at the ages of 3, the child will transition to the preschool special education program indicated in Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that's the one most teachers are familiar with, right? Because that's the IEP services. This is a table, again, from your book, and this is a good one to take a look at because it shows us the differences between the IFSP and the IEP. Again, most of the services will take place in the preschool, and that could be a preschool with and without children with disabilities, right? So in the least restrictive environment. And so preschools will vary depending on the child's needs. Again, so we have the LRE, right? And that's, again, from your textbook. So again, the movement from Part C of IDEA to Part B could be a problem for families, right? Families are used to services in the home. Families are used to sort of this one-on-one attention. And now they're moving into the services taking place in the school. So we need to understand that transitions may be very hard for families. So how do we support then? We really make sure that that we help the family to understand the disability, to know what is typical, what is not typical. Support groups, some families will benefit from support groups, some will not be interested, and supporting them to be empowered and know how to advocate for their child. And that takes us through Chapter 9.